Could this quiz help you avoid dementia? Plus animal magnetism and...
This is CBS News. America decides election 2026. I'm Major Garrett at CBS News election headquarters in New York. Good evening, everyone. Americans are voting in 6 states as part of the lead up to the midterms, and we have a very big projection that shows President Trump's continued persuasive power with Republican voters. Let's go straight to the 4th District of Kentucky, where Ed Gallrein is the projected, according to CBS News, winner over incumbent Thomas Massie in the most expensive primary election for a seat in the House ever. Some $33 million spent. We're going to run through all the rest of our boards here very quickly. Also, Kentucky Senate Republican primary, Andy Barr, the CBS News projected victor over Republican Daniel Cameron. Georgia Senate Republican primary, Mike Collins, currently the leader over Derek Dooley and Earl Buddy Carter. What's crucial there is, does any of these candidates get over 50.1? If not, there'll be a runoff. Same thing applies in the Georgia Republican gubernatorial primary, where currently Burt Jones, endorsed by President Trump, has a lead over Rick Jackson, though it's narrow, Brad Raffensperger, and the rest of the field. Moving on to the Georgia governor primary on the Democratic side, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, big lead, 60% currently over the field. Interesting thing there, does she get over 50% plus one? And if she does, she can avoid a June 16th runoff. Moving on. That's it. We have Ed O'Keefe, who's at Thomas Massie headquarters in Kentucky with the results and maybe some reaction. Ed?
Well, Major, we were told a few minutes ago that the congressman would be out here to speak shortly, and it appears he's doing that as news organizations like us declare his opponent the victor in the most expensive U.S. House primary ever in American history. More than $32 million spent, most of it against the sitting congressman by groups supportive of the president or concerned about the congressman's position on Israel. He told us yesterday that typically, if this were any other year where the president wasn't involved, he'd probably win this primary with 80% of the vote. But once the spending began, the margins started to close, and he conceded it was going to be a narrow race. If you look at the map of this district, which stretches from the eastern suburbs of Louisville up here to the suburbs just on the other side of the Ohio River from Cincinnati, and then on over to northeastern Kentucky towards the border with West Virginia, it is a district that is mostly rural, and it is those rural parts of this district in this very Republican state, at least presidential and federal level, that have gone for Ed Gallrein tonight, in essence taking cues from the president, despite the fact that Thomas Massie has represented this region since 2012 and has done so and been reelected in some other tough years for Republicans and in some other tough years for him and his relationship with the president. Gallrein got an 11th hour boost on Monday from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who took time out of an official schedule to stop just outside the Cincinnati airport on this side of the river and spent about 25 minutes speaking on Gallrein's behalf, saying that the president needs a more supportive member of Congress from this corner of Kentucky to help pad Republican majorities in Washington. But Massie now becomes just the latest in a long series of Republicans who've been booted from office because they crossed hairs with the president. Massie reminded us he has about a 90% voting record with House Republicans. It's that 10%, though, that upsets the White House because he's opposed to the war in Iran. He pushed for more transparency with the Epstein documents. He's been a big critic of foreign aid and other excessive federal spending, and all of that put him at odds with the president, who called him the worst Republican congressman in the country, and over the last several days relentlessly called on Kentucky Republicans to boot him from office. It appears they've done that tonight.
Ed, what do we know about Ed Gallrein, who is the projected winner in this contest?
He's a former state Senate candidate, fifth-generation cattle farmer, and a Navy SEAL. And as the president likes to say about guys he likes in this business, he comes out of, in the president's view, central casting. Tall guy, native to Kentucky, obviously, and someone who has said on the stump, I will be a reliable vote for the president. In fact, he was asked in an interview with the New York Times, you got any interesting committee assignments you'd like? And his answer was, well, I guess I'll check with the speaker and the president and the vice president. That's not typically what you hear from a congressional candidate who's a member of a separate branch, but that he's willing to take his cues on almost everything from the White House shows you how loyal he would be to the president.
Ed O'Keefe, stand by, and when Thomas Massie comes to the podium, we will take our audience there live. In the meantime, to explain it all, I want to bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, we love to show our work. How did we get to this projection in this race so early in the evening?
So let me show you exactly how I did it. Here's your breakdown of the vote, 54-45. That's for Gallrein. Now, if you look at what we have in, that's about 3/4 of what we expect the total vote to be. So what would Massie have needed to catch up? I'll show you. And it's 61%. But he's not getting 61%. And there's no place he's going to get 61%. That's how you make the projection. The other thing, Major, I want to show you is a larger context about this, because Ed was talking, you were talking about the president's influence. Some of that comes from voters, especially from voters who are going to vote in a primary like this. A little bit smaller turnout, a little bit more concentrated ideological electorate. So I'll show you this from our national poll. Asked Republicans, what do you want in a candidate? Well, Republicans generally want somebody who will support at least most of what Donald Trump wants, if not everything. But take a look at this. Among MAGA Republicans, you get almost 9 in 10 that want that, at least most, if not everything Donald Trump wants. And that puts some of the impetus, some of the context behind what you saw in this campaign and ultimately Massie going down.
Anthony, let's go back to the map, what you were just showing us, because I want our audience to understand past his prologue, we believe, typically in these projections, meaning what they have done up until that 75% of the vote total is reflective of what they're likely to do with the remaining 25%. You said he needs 61% of the outstanding vote. What does our internal projection suggest it's going to actually be?
He's tracking right about where he is. He's tracking right about 47%. And, all of this is patterns. So you look at county after county, and we can just rattle them off, but you're going to start to get the idea. Yeah, there's a couple of larger ones where Massie's doing well, but one after another, and you see Gallrein with that consistent lead. Consistency is everything. So when you project, yes, it's going out to what is still remaining out there, and it's not enough for Massie.
I want to ask you about something else we're watching tonight, the state of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has 4 House races that could be decisive in the midterm elections come November. And what fascinates me, Anthony, I know it does you as well, Pennsylvania is organic in this regard. No redrawn district lines. Right. Walk us through what we're watching tonight in Pennsylvania.
We're looking along the Delaware River here. We're looking at places around. You hear these names all the time. Allentown, Bucks County, all these places that are, yes, swing areas. And all along here, you're seeing districts. They are slightly Republican leaning, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's take, for example, the Pennsylvania 8th. If I go back and I pull up, the vote from last time, this is a narrow win, right? This is a narrow win from 2024. And I can go one after another, and you will see these are closely contested. So to your point, they haven't been redrawn. They haven't been gerrymandered the way a lot of places are. And yes, the road to House control runs through just a few states, like the ones you mentioned, including Pennsylvania.
Anthony and I are here in New York, but in D.C., all my good colleagues who cover the Hill and other politics joining me, congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nicole Killian. And I want to talk to them both about what we've just projected, this highly watched, highly anticipated primary in Kentucky's 4th congressional district. Caitlin, you first.
Well, Major, I can say that the administration, the Trump administration, Trump allies are celebrating this. I want to read you a tweet or a post on X from Stephen Chung, the communications director at the White House. And I'm going to paraphrase here because he uses an expletive, but he says, "Do not ever doubt President Trump and his political power. F around and find out. This is another incumbent this week that we have seen that crossed the president and has now paid a political price for it. But Major, I want to talk a little bit about Thomas Massie as a congressman. Nicole and I cover Congress. Whenever friends or family ask me, who are some of the more interesting members of Congress? Who kind of stands out? And my answer is always goes back to Thomas Massie. He is someone, we are in such a political, in an era where everything is tribal. Politics is so tribal. You rarely have anybody standing out from their party leadership. Thomas Massie is one of them, and that separates him from some of these others, like Cassidy, who we saw in Louisiana fall last week. John Cornyn, who may indeed fall next week in his primary, now not endorsed by Trump. Massie has made it his identity, his brand, to stand apart from his party and from the president. Even though he votes with him a majority of the time, he has not been one of those members who has tried to get himself back into the president's good graces and try to move legislation that pleases the president or make statements that please the president. He has been unabashed about his record and has made it, a huge part of this campaign. He is not ashamed to be in this position. And Nicole and I both talked to him last week, as we often do, on the Hill, and he was confident he would win this race. But now the political reality is, obviously hasn't worked in his favor. But I think as you're looking at kind of the aggregate of the candidates who have, in Trump's view, crossed him in some way, Massie stands out as someone who has always kind of had this independent streak and didn't kind of realign himself to fit the president's priority.
And Nicole, it's worth pointing out that, as Ed said, the most expensive primary in American history. I believe the total is now close to $33 million spent, most of it against Thomas Massie, which indicates he wasn't a pushover. Defeated, yes, but it took a lot of Republican allied groups taking their direction from the White House, pouring a ton of money into this race in order to defeat Thomas Massie.
Yeah, that's right. And that certainly wasn't lost upon him. I guess to build off of Caitlin's point, I would say while he may have projected confidence potentially about winning the race, at the same time, I think he was very clear-eyed, because I asked him whether he was concerned about the outcome of this primary. And he did hedge a little bit, and he just said, look, this is going to be a close race. It's going to come down to turnout. There was another reporter with me who said, normally you're somebody who projects a lot of confidence, but you don't sound very ironclad about this. I'm just kind of paraphrasing the exchange, and he acknowledged, that he was noticing that the polling was looking a lot different this time around. He said, keep in mind, Tom Massie has been in office since 2012, and he said, normally when I'm looking at polls, they're 80-20, but it appeared the most recent polls, he was down to single digits. So he was watching those numbers, not just the amount being spent against him, but also these poll numbers very closely. And also, it wasn't lost upon him that he was part of this so-called Trump revenge tour, if you will. In fact, he called himself the main event or the main act. So to Caitlin's point, obviously, we have seen time and again, most recently, where the president has endorsed someone else in a primary race, just most recently with Bill Cassidy. Of course, now in this case, we saw the president come out against Massie's challenger, and of course, Massie suffering this loss tonight. So I think Massie was very clear-eyed about the odds that were stacked against him. But because he is one of those people who's not afraid to take a stand, all he could do is run and present his best case to the voters.
I want to bring in Joel Payne, a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist, and Terry Sullivan, CBS News political contributor, former campaign manager for Marco Rubio's 2016 presidential run, for their analytical perspective. Terry, let me start with you. Money is not infinite in politics, and when you spend money in one place, you can't spend it in another. And a lot of money was spent to defeat Thomas Massie. This is, in the moment, quite clearly a victory for President Trump. But come the fall, with all the money dedicated from outside and GOP-aligned groups against Thomas Massie, I wonder, will the White House wish it had some of those reserves spent in Kentucky's 4th congressional district for other races come the fall?
You know, Major, I might disagree with you. I think that Thomas Massie feels like money is infinite in politics. It spent against him in that race. That was a dramatic amount of money spent by outside groups to defeat him. But look, there's going to be more money than ever nationwide on both sides of the electorate in midterm elections this time. So I don't think that $30 million is going to really impact anything for Republicans or Democrats either direction. It was a tremendous amount of money. The sitting president who still has a firm control on the base of the party, working hard against him.
Terry, let me jump in if I could, because Thomas Massie is addressing supporters. Upon learning he is a projected loser in this Republican primary. Thomas Massie, I believe, is approaching the microphones. Right, Ed?
I did get the call through, though. I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way. You know, welcome to the most expensive congressional primary ever in the 250-year history of this country. It's not just the most expensive.
Okay.
This thing went on longer than Vietnam. It started 9 months ago, and they didn't even have a candidate, and they decided they wanted to take me out. I want to start by thanking the volunteers who have put so much effort into this. Some of you came from all across the country. Some of you are homegrown. I love all of you. Started 9 months ago, and they didn't even have a candidate, and they decided they want to take me out. I want to start by thanking the volunteers who have put so much effort into this. Some of you came from all across the country. Some of you are homegrown. I love all of you. I see how this is going to work. I'm going to have to not quit talking, or you'll start doing it. I want to thank my staff, too. Some of my staff have been with me from the very first race in 2012, and they have done so much. We've never had, contrary to all the BS you've heard, we've never had a single ethics complaint filed against me or my staff in 14 years. I want to thank the donors. Now listen, I'd name them all, but there's 50,000 donors, okay? We didn't lose this race because we didn't have enough money. You know, it is the most expensive race ever. I think when they add it up, right now they can count 35 million. I think when they add it up, it's going to be a lot more than that, because on our side, we know we spent more than 15 million. And we were able to go toe-to-toe. There was never a week that we got outspent more than 2-to-1 in this entire race once it got underway. And that's also, it wasn't just the grassroots. Surf him over here. Long time, one of my longest friends. He went through a rough spell, and I never left him. I always supported him. And he actually started the Super PAC, the one that nobody knows who runs it, Cliff Maloney. If you're around, would you come up here? Maybe I can get him out here to take some credit. Or if he's in the crowd, just pick him up and surf him over here. Cliff. I see, by the way, I see one of my online influencer heroes, Bobby Sauce, over here. There were a lot of surreal moments in this race, and frankly, in being in Congress. But being in a side-by-side racing through the woods with Bobby Sauce was definitely on my. It wasn't even on my bucket list. It was amazing. So, getting to that point, I want to thank the influencers who came all this way and produced all the videos and got out the young vote. I want to thank my family. That's who we have arrayed back here, my grandbabies, all three of them. She's clapping, too. It's a little bit overwhelming for them, but they are what recharges my batteries when I come back from Washington, D.C., these grandbabies. And that's what we're fighting for, really, is the next generation and the next generation after that. But I have to especially thank my wife, Carolyn. Her parents knew what they were doing when they named her. Her middle name is Grace. And but she's a fighter. I mean, she's been tweeted at twice by the chief executive of the most powerful country in the world. She blames me for that because I didn't invite him to the wedding. But also, she voted this morning, and she came out and she said, well, that was a wild experience. That was great. I never imagined that would happen. And I said, what happened? She said, I got to vote for my husband and my favorite congressman. I said, that's practically a throuple. Oh. In all seriousness, walking out here and seeing all of you has really energized me. And it has all along. But why am I hopeful right now? Because if you looked at the crosstab in the polling, and I'm sure if we had exit polling, it would show the same thing. We have the younger demographic. You are patriots, and you will inherit this country, and you will make it better, and I am hopeful because of that. Thank you. We accidentally, I think, didn't mean to do this. It started out as an election, and it turned into a movement.
I want to bring in Ed O'Keefe, who is at Thomas Massie's headquarters. Ed, as you well know, American traditions in politics, some of them endure. One of them is when you win, you thank everyone. When you lose, you thank everyone. One new added dimension to a concession speech, invocation of the word throuple. We'll leave that where that is. But when Thomas Massie says he has 50,000 donors and this was a campaign that turned into a movement, I detected in my ear, Ed, at least the idea that he might think or imagine a political future for him in a post-Trump era, whenever that might be.
Maybe in a post-Trump era. And I got to say, Major, I've been doing this 20 years. I hadn't heard the T word used in an election night speech either, so that was new. He also began by saying that he had some difficulty. He was joking here, but he said that he'd had some difficulty finding his opponent, Ed Gallrein, because he was, quote, in Tel Aviv. He has said this a few times over the course of this primary because what he is calling out is the fact that there are several super PACs backed by well-known Republican super PAC donors like Marian Adelson, Paul Singer, and others whose money is often directed towards pro-Israeli causes. And Massie is an opponent of foreign aid. He's an especially strident opponent of continued U.S. aid to Israel. And he argued that the first wave of money that came into this race was from those kinds of groups opposed to his votes on Israel and on foreign aid, and that is why ultimately that plus the president's support is what caused him to lose. But this is a notable defeat for a congressman who had come sort of out of the Tea Party movement, the Rand Paul libertarian wing of the Republican Party that's thrived in years past here in Kentucky, but tonight goes down in what appears to be, at least at this hour, a double-digit defeat.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much. I want to bring back Joel Payne and Terry Sullivan. Terry, I had to drop you from commenting on this as it was going on. If you have any other thoughts you want to add after listening to Thomas Massie, please add them. And then, Joel, the stage will be yours.
Yeah, look, he's a good man, and he is obviously losing with some grace and dignity, which is nice to see in politics today. You know, this is politics. There's a winner, there's a loser, and he's doing it with class.
Joel Payne.
Yeah, I'm watching with some interest as a Democrat here, and there's a couple things that jump out to me. One, you know, Major, you brought up the point earlier of how much Republicans have spent on it, and I tend to agree with Terry's point that there's plenty of money washing around in Republican politics, but I do think it says something that to essentially probably win by, you know, Anthony could check this, 15,000 votes. Donald Trump and his allies had to spend well into the 20s and 30s of millions of dollars to do that. They just, by the way, had to do that in Indiana to punish Republican state senators spending 10x in a race. This is because Donald Trump and his political entourage, they believe that their strength is by absolute 1,000% fealty from the Republican base. That is the one thing that they cannot lose. And they are showing you that that's the thing that they can't lose by where they spend their dollars and how they're doing it. That does not mean that they are adding to their coalition. And that's one of the reasons why in 2026, they're not going to end up on the right side of the ballot this November, because they have a base strategy, and a base strategy can't save you in a midterm, particularly when your base is going to be depressed anyway. Donald Trump's strategy here is on display, and I think that that's notable. I think, you know, a little bit more broadly, look, we're talking about Thomas Massie here. Earlier today, Donald Trump made news by endorsing Ken Paxton over John Cornyn. Recently, Bill Cassidy lost in Louisiana. These are all folks who I think the Trump folks would say are not the most loyal. There's going to be a very interesting governing moment for the next 4, 5, 6 months in this Congress that is very closely divided. It'll be an interesting job for John Thune to hold that Republican conference together in the Senate, and it'll be an interesting job for Mike Johnson to do the same on the House, because the margins are thin, and essentially the president is throwing these folks who are 90+% allies overboard because they're not 105% allies. And that'll be fine, I guess, in 2027. But for the rest of 2026, when you got to get your $1 billion ballroom and you got to get your $1 billion slush fund and all the other things that Donald Trump wants to prioritize, when you have to get those things done, not having those allies in Congress who actually have a reason to be loyal to you anymore will start to show up.
Joel, there was an indicator of that very factor this afternoon in the United States Senate when there was yet another vote on a war powers resolution question. Bill Cassidy, now defeated Republican senator from Louisiana, had always been voting with the White House. Today he switched, voted for that war powers resolution. That was an early indicator that Bill Cassidy may no longer be on the Trumpian reservation, having now been defeated at the hands of the president. Coming up, we will check in on a big race in a battleground state. You're watching CBS News, America Decides, Election 2026.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there, and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police! You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
I'm Tony DeCopel from a region at war tonight.
To tell the story,
Hello up there.
You have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
I'm Tony. I work for CBS.
Can you clarify what this war is about? How do you avoid this becoming a death trap?
This war only seems to be accelerating.
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
Welcome back. We are going to train our eye for the moment on the state of Georgia and some races there. We're going to start with the governor's primary on the Republican side. Burt Jones, endorsed by the president, currently leading, though marginally, over Rick Jackson. Let's go to the governor's primary on the Democratic side, where former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has a pretty big lead over Jason Estevez. The key question there, will Keisha Lance Bottoms have 50+1 to avoid a runoff? Now, moving on in Georgia. The Senate Republican primary, Mike Collins leads over Derek Dooley, and Earl Buddy Carter also in that race, trailing Derek Dooley. Mike Collins endorsed by the president. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry is covering all of this in Georgia. Skylar, what do we know?
Hey, Major, good to be with you. We are keeping an eye on all of those races. We should point out that just in the last 5 minutes or so, we heard from Fulton County election officials who said that they are not reporting any of their results this evening until their final precinct closes at 11 p.m. tonight. You may be asking why that is. Well, there was an incident earlier today nearby in the neighborhood of Sandy Springs where law enforcement were on a manhunt looking for what they believe to have been an armed suspect that didn't have anything to do with the elections, but was close to a polling location. And so that location was closed from a little after 11 this morning up until earlier this afternoon. Fulton County says that they will extend that polling location's hours up until 11 p.m. so those votes can properly be cast, and those voters that may not have been able to get to the polling location will be allowed to do so. That aside, the races that we are paying attention to, top of the ticket, the Senate race. We know that the Democrat, John Ossoff, running unopposed, but really that three-way race on the Republican side is really interesting. We are here at the Derek Dooley watch party just outside of Atlanta, where we anticipate the former Tennessee volunteer football coach to take the stage tonight alongside Governor Brian Kemp, who has endorsed him every step of the way. Kemp was widely viewed as a shoo-in in the Senate before he announced that he was not participating in the race. That aside, he says that Dooley is the the man for the job. Here's why, Major. He says that it will be an outsider that will be necessary in order to win this primary, and also, for that matter, defeat Senator Ossoff in November. So we will see what happens there. That aside, we are also expecting a significant turnout for Mike Collins, who is a congressman who represents the area just east of Atlanta. He is someone who touts himself as a MAGA warrior and also touts a conservative agenda. The same said for the Congressman Earl Buddy Carter. Both of them have traded jabs at one another over the course of the last several weeks, so I think it'll be interesting to see what shakes out as these ballots continue to be counted. Further down the ballot in the gubernatorial race, and you pointed this out, on the Republican side, there's Burt Jones, the current lieutenant governor, who has the support of President Trump. He was widely viewed as the runaway favorite in this race for some time, and that is until the healthcare billionaire Rick Jackson jumped into this race, spending an incredible amount of money over the course of the last several months, moving forward and really raising momentum in this race. And so I think it'll be especially interesting to see what happens there, because remember, 50% is really what the number is that many of these candidates are looking for to avoid that June 16th runoff race. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in that race. On the Democratic side, we know that the former Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottom, certainly has a sizable lead right now at around 60% with the number of ballots that have been counted thus far. Many said that she was one of the names that had the largest name recognition, so to speak, but there were some concerns in the metro Atlanta area, Major, because some people said because the former mayor didn't run for a second term, they were concerned whether she would be able to do the job as governor. Clearly, based off of the results that we've seen thus far tonight, that does not appear to be the case as it relates to support there. Still, however, there are some other interesting Democrats to pay attention to as the ballots continue to roll in. One of the other big things that we are watching here, Major, is what happens in the state Supreme Court. This is a race that has had significant support and also input from former President Barack Obama, former Vice President Kamala Harris, as well as others, as they want several Democrats to be named to the state Supreme Court to trump the incumbents that are running in this race, as they are really calling this a proxy war, so to speak, over a range of issues, everything from redistricting to abortion rights, and that is all incredibly interesting to pay attention to as well. We expect to hear from Derek Dooley and also the Governor Brian Kemp later on tonight to see what they have to say about the state of this race, but still a lot of interesting storylines coming out of the Peach State, Major.
And Skylar, very quickly, to go back to where you started. So Fulton County will not release any results until 11 p.m. The rest of the state clearly is. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. So initially, officials from Fulton County said that they would look to count every other precinct but the one precinct that was closed throughout the majority of the day today because of that earlier incident with law enforcement nearby. Now they're saying that they won't count any of the ballots in that county up until 11 p.m. when the polls close there. So I think we'll see those returns come back relatively quickly, given that they have most of the other precincts already in, but still, as it relates to results, we won't see many of those until after the 11 p.m. hour.
Skylar Henry, thank you so very much. I want to go back to Anthony Salvanto. So, Anthony, Fulton County is a very big county. We're not going to have it until 11, but we're seeing trend lines across the state. What are we seeing?
Well, two things. One is you see the race for the runoff, yes or no. Right now, it's trending towards this is going to a runoff.
The Senate Republican primary.
We don't know that for certain yet, but you can see the way this is tracking.
And I want to let the audience know one thing about that, Anthony, because this race is distinct from the governor's primary on the Republican side. President Trump has not endorsed in this race. He's not endorsed Mike Collins, Derek Dooley, or Earl Buddy Carter.
Right. But I wanted to, that's exactly right. And that may be making a difference here, right? That may be making a difference here. And maybe when it gets to the runoff, that dynamic will change. But But this is so important because the other thing I want to show you here is you mentioned Fulton County, right? And we're watching this at the data desk too. Yes, it's a big county, but it's a Democratic county.
Absolutely.
Okay? So in a Republican Senate primary or Senate or gubernatorial primary, you're not necessarily going to get a whole lot of votes out of there in a relative way. In this case, my expected vote is around 57,000. Sounds like a lot, but statewide, it may not make a difference. So we may get a sense of whether or not this is headed to a runoff with or without Fulton, though, of course, we want to see everything. But I just wanted to put that in context for people. Otherwise, you do see a very sort of regional breakdown, right? Carter doing well down near Savannah where he's from. But that's really your breakdown.
One thing I want to bring our audience's attention to, the orange around Fulton County. These are the suburbs around Atlanta where it appears Derek Dooley is doing somewhat well.
Yes, he is. And in fact, if you go through, he is in the lead in those places, doing a little better in the suburban vote as opposed to the rural vote. In fact, what I can also do for you here, Major, is I can show you the way we run the models on this from the decision desk. And right now, not only is there overlap, but you also see, this is showing you the ranges of potential percentages these folks might end up with. And right now, Collins at his best in our models is at 46. Again, not enough to avoid the runoff. Dooley might still catch him, but at the same time has a ceiling right there. That's how we look at it at the decision desk, and that's how that breaks down. The other thing, if I could, real quick, is just for the sake of context, when we talk about Senate, okay? First, I'm going to show you, I mean, this is pretty easy, right? Ossoff is the incumbent senator.
Unchallenged.
Not all my calls are difficult. He's
right.
unopposed. Okay, so he's the incumbent senator. But this is, for context, one of the battleground Senate states. And we got to really keep that in mind because the Democrats basically need to hold on to Georgia in order to have a chance, which is an uphill climb, but to have a chance to take back the Senate. That's why we're watching Georgia tonight.
Very good. Anthony Salvanto, I want to appreciate it very, very much. When we come back, the fight to redistrict and what it means for the balance of power in Washington. That redistricting fight's been going on back and forth all year, as I'm sure you've noticed. More on that when we come back. You're watching CBS News America Decides, Campaign 2026.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gayle King.
Hey!
CBS
Mornings. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7.
CBS Mornings.
CBS Mornings.
What she said.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
A woman is run off the road
He just hit my car.
and calls 911.
He is there to kill her.
Surveillance camera images help identify her killer.
He appears in a hurry. He was hunting that night.
Absolutely.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
man convicted in the arson death of a billionaire in Monaco reinvents himself and decades later orders a hit in New Mexico.
He kept asking me if I knew somebody that could kill his wife.
You think he targeted her?
Yeah.
This isn't the first time he's been in question of a heinous crime.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the Takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you?
Oh, come on.
Join me on the Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News, America Decides Campaign 2026. Let's check back in on some of the big races tonight. The biggest one, at least as far as the White House is concerned, Kentucky's 4th Congressional District, Ed Gallrein defeats, according to CBS News projections, incumbent Thomas Massie. Let's go to Pennsylvania. A couple of interesting House races that have got our attention. 3rd Congressional District, Alice Stanford currently leads, but that is a close race in Pennsylvania at number 3. How about Pennsylvania 12, Summer Lee? Big lead over William Parker in the 12th district in Pennsylvania. Now, not all Alabama, we're going to talk about Alabama right now. Races were on the ballot today. Some of those races in Alabama postponed because the state congressional map is being redrawn, this following the Supreme Court's decision on redistricting. I'm sure you read quite a bit about that. Alabama is one of several states in the process of redrawing its maps because of that Supreme Court ruling. CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford joins us now. Jan, how are states able to enact new maps while voting is either underway or almost underway?
Well, like you said, in Alabama, they approved an actual different election, a special election that'll be held on August 11th, and they're planning to use a map that the legislature, the Republican-controlled legislature, adopted in 2023 that had 6 Republican districts and 1 majority-black Democratic district. In the wake of that landmark ruling, as you pointed out last month, Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, they're trying to redraw these maps, whether by having, special elections for some of these contested legislative districts. So now in Alabama, what's going to happen is, the message was go vote, don't be confused. But if you're in one of these 4 legislative districts that the state is now kind of going to reconfigure, then you're going to go back to vote on August 11th. And the state, again, hopes to use that 2023 map that has that 1 majority black district instead of 2. A lower court had blocked that 2023 map, ordered Alabama in 2024 to use a different map with 2 majority black districts, which provided 2 Democratic seats, and Alabama had 4 then Republican seats. So the state is now hoping to go back to that 2023 map. They're obviously a step ahead. It's easier for Alabama to do this quickly in the wake of that decision. The lower court still has to sign off on this, though. So it's not totally clear that Alabama is going to be able to do what it wants to do. Same thing you're seeing in Tennessee. There are legal challenges going on there. And then, of course, in Louisiana, they're hoping to go back to their original map that had just 1 majority black district. Louisiana, like Alabama, had been ordered to do a new map with 2.
Jen, I made reference to a U.S. Supreme Court decision, but there was also a recent decision by the Commonwealth of Virginia Supreme Court about a referenda that happened in that state that was overturned, affecting future map drawing in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, Major, I think that decision, which was out of the state Supreme Court based on the state constitution, kind of reflects where the U.S. Supreme Court thinks that these fights should be, not in the federal courts. Federal courts, the Supreme Court, I believe, has made pretty clear, should not be ordering up new maps, trying to draw new maps, appoint special masters to draw up new legislative districts. That belongs in the political process. So you saw when that state Supreme Court in Virginia rejected efforts, looking at kind of how the process unfolded, rejected efforts to redistrict that whole state in a way that would have greatly benefited Democrats. You saw the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously refuse to take that up, to get involved when Democrats appealed to the United States Supreme Court. It's a state issue, state law, and they're going to stay out of it.
CBS News, Jan Crawford, thank you so very much. CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto has a closer look at the ramifications of all of the redistricting that has gone on this year. He's joined by Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball Managing Editor, Kyle Kondik. So, Anthony and Kyle, try to, if you can, and this is a big challenge, net this out based on new lines and what those new lines might create come November.
Emphasis on the word might.
Yes.
We're going to come back to that in a second. But just to remind people, first of all, how unusual this is unprecedented. We're in the middle of a decade talking about redistricting state to state. But here's where we are. You may recall Texas redrew its lines, gave itself maybe 3 to 5 more Republican seats. California passed that ballot measure, given them 3 to 5 maybe more Democratic seats. But then down the line, we had the Voting Rights Act decision that you just heard Jan describe, and that is leading to these redraws all through here, or potential redraws all through the South. Net, this is favoring Republicans, as you can see from the map with all these potential plus ones. I mean, the argument sort of goes back and forth. Is it maybe 9 seats? Is it maybe 6 seats when this all nets out? Kyle, what do you think?
You know, obviously, we got to have the election first to determine what the actual effect of the redistricting was. My best guess, our best guess of the crystal ball is Republican gain of 7 seats, but there's a range on that. It could be a little bit lower. It could be a lot higher than that, depending on how things shake out. But again, you got to remember that just because you change a map to benefit yourself, it's not necessarily going to do that. And I would specifically look at the Republican redraws because 2026 is going to stress test those maps in a way that they won't necessarily be tested for Democrats, because this is probably going to be a Democratic-leaning year. Because
the voters are still there. You just drew different districts around them. And so, I mean, take a couple of examples. Like in Texas, the thought may be there's a lot of Hispanic voters that shifted toward the Republicans in the last election. If they stay there, okay, that might benefit the Republicans. But if they move back towards the Democrats, maybe those redraws don't pan out as well for the Republicans. The other part of this is, Kyle, I was thinking there just aren't that many competitive House races overall, which makes this all the more important, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have 16 toss-up races in our House ratings.
I'll pull that up.
You know, out of 435 seats. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And the toss-ups are really they're mostly in states that aren't gerrymandered. So like Eastern Pennsylvania, we were talking about earlier in the show. There's a bunch of competitive seats there. That's a court-drawn map. Iowa, Michigan, Arizona, those are states that don't have partisan gerrymandering. Usually when the gerrymander happens, yeah, there may be some competitive seats, but basically you're just trying to create a bunch of safe seats for yourself and as few as possible safe seats for the other side.
And Anthony and Kyle, if I could jump in real quick.
Yeah, please.
Because we talked to Jan about what happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia. If I remember correctly, that was if that map had held, that new map, which was overturned by the Commonwealth Supreme Court, would have netted Democrats possibly 4. Right. That would have changed this mathematics a little bit.
Yep, sure would have.
That's why that decision is so important in the context of this midterm election.
Yep.
Yeah, and, you know, one way to look at this is that redistricting happened in 3 stages. The first stage was all last year. It was like California, Texas, Ohio, North Carolina, Missouri, Utah. That kind of netted out to basically a draw between the two parties. Stage 2 was Florida and Virginia. Florida's map is still in effect, although Florida has anti-gerrymandering language in its constitution. There's still an active court case there. But the idea was that Florida and Virginia would cancel each other out, but the Virginia map went away, so advantage Republicans. And then you have the Calais voting rights decision in which Republicans end up gaining a lot from the South. So that's why, you know, this has gone back and forth as to which side had an advantage. When Virginia passed its map, it looked like, oh, Democrats have an advantage. But then Republicans take the lead. The Virginia map goes away. So that's why we're here.
And just remind people, when we talk about that Calais decision, these are majority-minority districts that are now potentially being drawn away, which will have an effect not just on the composition of Congress, but also on the representation. People will argue back and forth within those states.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're going to see a number of black Democrats eliminated. Now, you know, there's partisan gerrymandering going on all over the country. And I think what Republicans would say is, hey, partisan gerrymandering is allowed. These are not racial considerations. These are partisan considerations, but the net effect is the same.
And that reference to the Calais decision, reference to the Supreme Court decision in Louisiana, which reinterpreted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Kyle Kondik, Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro is covering the Kentucky Senate race for us from Lexington. Aaron, this race on the Republican side became very clear when someone running in that race was persuaded by President Trump to drop out. and that made it a much easier path to victory for the projected winner tonight, Andy Barr.
That's right, Major. You know, all of the attention has been on the Thomas Massie race in northern Kentucky in that congressional district. Makes sense. It's a pretty unique situation there. But President Trump also played a role in this primary, as you mentioned. There's a businessman, Nate Morris, who was supported by $10 million from Elon Musk in sort of his opening salvo in terms of Republican spending for the 2026 midterms. But earlier this month, President Trump gave Morris an ambassadorship and also announced that he is backing Congressman Andy Barr over Daniel Cameron. That's the former Attorney General of Kentucky and was really seen as a protege of the outgoing retiring Senator Mitch McConnell. While Barr came into Congress the same time as Massie in 2012, he's definitely taken a different approach, and he has made a lot of friends that he says that have transitioned from the House and are now in the Senate that he thinks he can rely on should he win this November. But in his victory remarks, he really made clear that he does not want to take his foot off the gas pedal when it comes to the general election. He'll likely face Democrat Amy McGrath or Charles Booker. That race is still pending. Both are candidates that have lost in previous Senate races. But he made comments about what he called the far left of the Democratic Party. He said that they want to turn Kentucky into the, quote, Commonwealth of Kamala. In a reference to Maine Democratic Senate candidate Graham Plattner, he said, our story can't be driven by candidates with Nazi tattoos. So it's clear that Barr is looking to nationalize this race. But while I'm focused right now on the 2026 race for Senate in Kentucky, I do think the Massie results should put some eyes on Rand Paul in 2028. He's up for re-election then. He voted today for the War Powers Resolution to limit President Trump's powers when it comes to his military operation with Iran. You could definitely see some chatter of potential primary challengers to him in the next election cycle.
That's a great point, Aaron. I also want to take this moment to sort of take stock of Kentucky and its underlying political realities. When I first started covering Congress in the early 1990s, Mitch McConnell set about transforming Kentucky politics, which was decidedly Democratic then, to almost entirely Republican. Mitch McConnell succeeded in that effort, turning Kentucky into a reliably Republican state. But now it's a passing of a torch and criticism throughout Kentucky Republican ranks of Mitch McConnell himself, which was kind of an undercurrent of this Republican primary itself, even though Daniel Cameron came from the Mitch McConnell wing of the Republican Party.
That's right, Major. I remember one of the first elections I covered in 2019 was the gubernatorial race between Andy Beshear, the Democrat, and the then Governor Matt Bevin, the Republican. And when I was talking to voters, I heard a lot of people talk then about Daniel Cameron, who was seen as a protege of McConnell, somewhat as someone that could replace him potentially in the Senate. Fast forward 6-7 years later, Cameron was declared a loser almost immediately once polls closed. It really shows that while McConnell has shifted the Kentucky political apparatus towards Republicans, in the past 5 to 10 years, you've seen that shift even further right to match President Trump's version of the Republican Party.
It is a Trump Kentucky Republican Party, no longer a McConnell Republican Kentucky Party. Aaron Navarro, thank you so very much. I want to go to Nicole Killian and Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington, D.C. Nicole, your thoughts on what we've seen play out so far this evening?
Yeah, well, I think just to piggyback off of what you just said, it certainly marks a transition to a new era in Kentucky politics. I mean, when you think about Mitch McConnell, someone who has served for some 4 decades now, I mean, he is the longest serving party leader in Senate history, even though he stepped down from a leadership. But, you know, his impact still, I think, is wide reaching, particularly when you talk about the U.S. Senate. And so while, yes, this may now be Trump's party in Kentucky now, I think just like we have seen in some of these other races, you know, McConnell, while sometimes he has sided with the president, there are many times where he has not. And so, you know, I think you can also look at that as a dynamic in the race, particularly in terms of McConnell, because his name wasn't really invoked in this contest, nor was his endorsement really sought out. So to your point about just his, while his influence may seem waning, at the same time, I think we also have to remember what what he has contributed not only to Kentucky politics, but certainly to the U.S. Senate as well, where he continues to stand up for his ideals, the things that he believes in. And I think that's something that he will continue to do going forward.
And Caitlin Huey Burns, I want to ask you about something that I think is part of the dynamic of the president involving himself in so many of these internal Republican Party primary battles. It seems to me that he knows whatever the results of the 2026 midterms are, he only has, after that, 2 more years in office. But what he wants after he departs is a Congress, House and Senate, with more MAGA-aligned Republicans, or the highest number he can create in these primary contests, because every single time the president gets involved, he tends to get his way.
That's right. I mean, he is certainly reshaping this Congress, but you have to ask whether this is in his favor in the long run. If you think about just the next couple of months, you have a couple of lawmakers who will be kind of in what I call a YOLO moment, which is that they are now unencumbered by the politics of their party. I mean, take a look at Cassidy, who voted for the War Powers resolution today. You have Tom Tillis in North Carolina, who's not running anymore, who has been a critic of the president and his own party. Obviously, Massie has been running that way for a while now, but will be even more unencumbered. And we'll see what John Cornyn next week does if he loses his primary. And the other point is, Major, that there is no doubt that the president has a hold on his party. As we've talked about all night, this is Trump's Republican Party. It has been for a while, but tonight really solidified that. But a primary is very different from a general election. Trump is the biggest driver for Republicans in elections. He's also the biggest driver for Democrats. And that is something that is that both parties are going to contend with, but especially Republicans running in some of these more difficult battleground states. It's one thing to have a hold on your party in the primary, another about what that means in a general election, especially in a place like Georgia and other battlegrounds where they'll be fighting for control of that chamber.
There is reference sometimes by the president to a rhino Republican in name only. Maybe we will have an emerging YOLO Republican conference. Caitlin Huey Burns, thank you very much. You're watching CBS News America Decides Campaign 2026. I promise you, we'll be right back.
I want to know what's going on in the world. You can't do that if you're just sitting in a chair, reading about what other people have found. You have to get out there and listen. By telling people about each other, you actually bring this country together. There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. I'm Tony DeCopel. Join me on the CBS Evening News.
Who's our victim? 33 years old, naval intelligence officer.
Looks like there's a story there.
Oh, wow. That's really nice silk. How about I just give you guys the highlights?
Federal agents! Everyone down!
The robbery and the murder are connected.
Genius, McGee.
Elite. Very elite.
NCIS is all new CBS Tuesday, 8/7 Central, and streaming on Paramount+.
Go to the ends of the earth, half a world away, and reach for the stars.
If I take time to think, they might go get Brad.
Experience thought-provoking,
something that speaks to people across time.
Innovative.
It's this magical process.
And truly original reporting.
You've discovered you're more of a songwriter. Where does that leave you?
Great question. Because there's always something new under the sun. There's a lot more on the menu on CBS Sunday morning.
We're U.S. Marshals. We do this job because others can't.
Saddle up, cowboy.
Over 25 million viewers.
Try to keep up.
Have made CBS's Marshals TV's #1 news show.
Turn you into a cowboy yet?
Back on the crazy train.
Let's go. Marshals came up big today.
Marshals, a new era of Yellowstone. New episodes CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount Plus.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Inside Abbey Road Studios.
This almost makes us Beatles.
The Police's Stuart Copeland.
Love the drums. What is it about the orchestra?
Creates Wild Concerto.
Look at that.
I'm Tony. I work for CBS.
To tell the story.
I'm Tony DeCopo, live from one of the many cities in this region under fire.
You have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
We have a team of correspondents across the Middle East and at the White House.
I called President Trump to talk about his latest thinking.
Missiles coming in, and there's another one. You can see how empty the streets are. You heard the explosion?
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopo. Weeknights.
Welcome back to CBS News, America Decides Campaign 2026. I'm Major Garrett at CBS News election headquarters in New York. We're tracking several races, as you've already gathered this evening, with potentially pretty big implications for this November's midterms. And of course, if there's a shift in power, well, does that mean President Trump's agenda will be blocked, or will there be a resilient Republican majority that clings to that power and tries to abet it in the next year? I want to check in on some of the latest results right now. CBS News. Right now we have the Georgia governor Republican primary. Burt Jones endorsed by the president with a narrow lead over Rick Jackson. That is going to go to a runoff on June 16th. Moving on to the Georgia governor's primary on the Democratic side, Keisha Lance Bottoms, former mayor of Atlanta, with a lead over Jason Estevez, a sizable lead. The key question there, 50% plus one would avoid a runoff for the former Atlanta mayor. Switching now to the Georgia Senate Republican primary. Trump did not endorse in this race, at least not yet. Mike Collins currently the leader over Derek Dooley and Earl Buddy Carter. That one also appears to be headed toward a runoff. Switching our attention to Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Andy Barr, the CBS News projected winner in the Republican Senate primary over Daniel Cameron. And in probably the most watched race, at least at the White House, Ed Gallrein defeats incumbent Thomas Massie and does so somewhat handily. CBS News elections and surveys director, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, joins me. Anthony, what do you have your eyes on right now?
Let's talk Pennsylvania.
Let's do it.
It wouldn't be an election night if we weren't talking Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
And look, come November, House control, we've said this before, is probably going to run through Pennsylvania. Let me show you what I mean. There are a number of congressional districts all along the river here in eastern Pennsylvania that are all going to be competitive. Wouldn't be an election night if I didn't say Bucks County, right?
Exactly.
So here we're going to do, here's a Democratic primary in CD1. But the point here really is, if I show you what the presidential vote is in some of these districts, in this case, in Congressional District 1, this is a narrow win, okay? There's a narrow Democratic win. So what it tells you is the partisanship here is really close, and that's how we gauge, in part, whether these CDs are going to be competitive or not, right? I can take you to the 7th Congressional District. Here's a Dem primary going on right now. We've still got that one. It's pretty tight, all else equal. But if I show you the presidential vote in there, here's again, narrowly went for Donald Trump. That's what I mean by contested congressional races, and that's what I mean by we're going to watch this in November.
And Anthony, when we bring up the 2024 election results by congressional district in Pennsylvania, we see the president prevailing narrowly in these competitive House races.
Indeed.
Without him on the ballot, that is a different dynamic, possibly worrisome for whoever the Republican nominee is.
Maybe the central question come November, which is, we know the Republicans will turn out when Donald Trump is on the ballot. Will they when he is not? Now, we're already getting some indications, like with the Massie race, et cetera, that his campaign can now motivate those voters and turn out. Was less the case in previous years, was not the case in 2018. The last time he faced a midterm and lost seats, right? That is the central question. Has that changed?
And it also seems to me, Anthony, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in these competitive congressional districts, particularly in Pennsylvania, some of these Republican voters in presidential cycles could be fairly described as lightly attached Republicans, not as aggressively MAGA or aggressively Republican in their behavior election to election to election, which means they could be up for grabs or they could sit this one out.
That is correct. And part of that is evident from the tight races. Part of that is evident in the way that these areas are changing. The Lehigh Valley, you talk about Scranton, we hear it all the time about Bucks County, right? We hear stories and we talk a lot about in the past, manufacturing, steel, coal, all of those things. These places have changed now. They're distribution centers, there's call centers, there's a lot of different and changing demographics as well as the economy around there. And that tightness in the vote is reflective of those changes.
Anthony Salvanto, great stuff as always. Congressional reporter Torian Small is in the aforementioned, I know that's a big SAT word, probably shouldn't use it on television, but I did anyway, aforementioned Bucks County, Pennsylvania, covering races there. Torian, catch us up.
Yeah, so we're waiting for the governor to come out and speak. His lieutenant governor is talking on stage now. Even though the governor didn't face his own primary challenge, he's been laser focused in bringing up Democrats down ballot. You talked about those four competitive races that we're all watching, the 1st, 7th, 8th, and 10th. But let's zoom in on the 7th congressional district. Republican incumbent Ryan McKenzie, a freshman congressman, beat Susan Wild in 2024 to get that seat, is feeling extra vulnerable now that there's a handful of Democrats looking to unseat him. Governor Shapiro is backing Bob Brooks, a retired firefighter and union leader who spent the past couple of weeks building out a broad coalition of supporters. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, the DCCC, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, all standing behind him as he looks to be the one to unseat McKenzie. We caught up with McKenzie in Polk County, a fairly red county, earlier today, and we asked him about the added pressure he must be feeling this time around, especially considering the governor is looking to add his influence to bring out more voters in November. He says he feels like the governor won't necessarily meet the moment, pointed to 2024 as proof of that, and he says he's been campaigning on addressing some issues that have been ubiquitous as under this administration, talking about affordability, gas prices, the economy. He says he wants to spend the next term addressing those things. That's something that didn't sit well with Governor Shapiro. I spent time with him over the weekend as he's campaigned in places like Allen County, Bucks County, Montgomery County, and he says that this will be a referendum on not just President Trump, but also Trump sycophants. He had some pretty tough words for McKenzie, calling him a weak-minded human, which is why he's putting his weight behind Brooks in that race. I also want to point out something that I found interesting. I had a chance to ask a question to Governor Shapiro today about the redistricting arms races happening around the country. They have a split government here in Pennsylvania, so the governor said that he won't be doing that. But when I asked him about that, if they were to retake the state Senate and have that trifecta, would they revisit this conversation? And I'm going to step to the side for a second, Major, because it sounds like Governor Shapiro is coming to the stage now. Let me get out the way so you can take a look.
Yes, and as Governor Shapiro makes it toward the stage, it has been described to us that this could be a little bit of a coming out party for the governor because the implications for 2026, obvious as Torian just described, but also there might be some implications for 2028 and someone that might have aspirations in that direction, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania.
I say a special thank you to Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. I will tell you the best decision I made 4 years ago was choosing you to be my running mate. You've been an outstanding and impactful Lieutenant Governor and a trusted voice in my ear. And tonight, my fellow Democrats once again showed great wisdom in elevating the son of a hairdresser and a union bus driver from Western Pennsylvania to the second most powerful job in our state. And I could not be more excited to wage this re-election campaign together. Thank you, Austin Davis. Thank you. You know I am called to serve by my faith, and I've been guided on this journey of service by my family. The way my parents raised me to care about people around me. The way a girl in the 9th grade took a chance on me by granting me a first date at Goodnoe Farms in Newtown, right here in Bucks County. That date led to 29 years of a happy marriage, the blessing of 4 children, and a life dedicated to doing our part to repair the world. And so to Pennsylvania's First Lady, that girl I shared an ice cream and some cheese fries with back in, you ready for this, 1987. I love you. Tonight, Laura and I take another step on our journey of service. This work I do, it comes with a responsibility to honor those who came before me and carry forward the baton of freedom and progress and democracy. Our first executive arrived on the banks of the Delaware River on a ship named Welcome in 1682. His name was William Penn. And he set out to build a place that would be welcoming for all, an example to the nations, he said. He was guided in this work by these core principles: the freedom to worship as you please, a government that was fair to its citizens, and free elections where people would choose their representatives. Now, 3.5 centuries later, we are gathered here tonight with a duty to protect those principles, to ensure that we do our part right now to pass them down to the next generation of Pennsylvanians. We have a responsibility to show that we will be the model to others who are watching us for our lead. I know that all feels at risk right now. I know we're worried and we're fearful and we're angry that this country that we love so much feels like it's slipping away, that the values that we hold dear are being squandered by a president and his band of enablers hell-bent on injecting chaos and cruelty and corruption into our lives every day. But we are here tonight, all of us are here, because we choose not to be captive to the chaos. We choose not to be part of the cruelty, and we choose not to turn a blind eye to the corruption. We are here tonight to push back, to say enough is enough, to reclaim our power, and to stand together in common purpose, the Pennsylvania way. My faith teaches me that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. And so, with a firm commitment to staying in the game and doing my part, I stand before you tonight to again accept the Democratic nomination for governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In these divisive times, and with a politically divided legislature, we've shown that we can be the example that Penn spoke of. Here, we've shown that we can get stuff done and do it in a way that respects all Pennsylvanians, no matter what you look like or where you come from, who you love or who you pray to or choose not to pray to. Together, we've increased investment in public education by 30% and drove those dollars out to the schools that need the most help. We've increased the number of teachers after years of decline and expanded mental health services in nearly 800 schools across our state. And now, free breakfast for all students is the law in Pennsylvania. I've taken on the utility companies and told them to their face that the rate hikes they were seeking were pure greed. We won, and we saved the people of Pennsylvania hundreds of millions of dollars on their energy bills. Pennsylvania has the only growing economy in the Northeast, creating nearly 23,000 new jobs during my time as your governor, more than all but 2 states in the entire nation. And get this, we've done more economic development during my time as governor than the previous 15 years combined. At the same time, we are preparing our workforce for tomorrow, doubling our investment in VOTEC, apprenticeships, and ending the college degree requirement to work in state government, treating all Pennsylvanians with respect. As of today, we've enrolled over 42,000 apprentices to open up new pathways to opportunity. We brought down crime to record lows while passing sweeping criminal justice reforms because we believe in second chances here in Pennsylvania. We have shown that we can respect our cops and we can respect our communities. Every Pennsylvanian, as the LG said, deserves to be safe and feel safe. We put money back in people's pockets, cut taxes for small businesses and families trying to afford childcare. We passed the largest targeted tax cut for seniors in nearly 2 decades. And we brought Democrats and Republicans together to pass the most progressive tax reform in years by giving 940,000 Pennsylvanians up to $800 back this year, working Pennsylvanians. When insurance companies tried to jack up the cost of your health care, I stepped in and saved Pennsylvanians millions of dollars on insurance premiums, and we even got them to finally cover mental health care in Pennsylvania. And when the eyes of the nation were on us after I-95 collapsed, and the experts said it would take months to rebuild, we showed the tenacity and the technical know-how to get traffic moving again on I-95 in just 12 days, thanks to the amazing skill of our Pennsylvania building trades. So much of this work has been possible because of the outstanding work of Speaker Joanna McClinton and Majority Leader Matt Bradford. They join us here tonight. And I want you all to hear me on this. Their strength as leaders is unmatched, and them and their colleagues should be proud of all we've accomplished together. While we've made real progress, understand I am hungry for more. I know people are hurting right now because of Trump's policies in D.C. and Republican intransigence in Harrisburg. We have more work to do. That's why these races up and down the ballot matter so much. We need to re-elect Brian Monroe so we can keep Speaker McClinton in charge of the State House. Are you with me?
The Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, telling, quite obviously, a Pennsylvania story. But with the rhetorical flourishes embedded in those remarks, you can see very easily how they could be enlarged to a national story rooted in Pennsylvania and the governor's particular political skills, possibly as a foreshadowing of an announcement about his intentions in 2028, especially the line moments ago that he is, quote, hungry for more. Joel Payne, CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. I'm going to let you start off. Joel, your impressions.
Oh, look, I think if you have the opportunity for the bully pulpit, you take it. And I imagine that that's what Governor Shapiro is doing tonight. You know, he ran without a race in Pennsylvania, but the real race he's running, I think, is for the future, and it's for hearts and minds, not just in Pennsylvania, but it's outside of the state. I think the best way that he feels like he can prepare himself for 2028 is putting Democrats in the best position possible to hold and grow their power base in Pennsylvania, support candidates like the Bob Brooks, the one that's challenging Ryan McKenzie in that district that Turan talked about, and then start to scale up to what a national campaign will be. I think, you know, what's interesting to me, Major, is, and I was just observing this as I was watching this speech, I think Shapiro offers all of the traditional qualities that Democrats typically want out of their national candidates. He's got a great cadence. He's got a great story. The story about rebuilding the bridge there in Pennsylvania after that tragic accident. I mean, it all scales up. I think, though, base Democrats, people who make up the rank and file of the Democratic Party, also want a fighter. And I think Governor Shapiro has actually not leaned into the national fight the way that some of his Democratic counterparts have, the Governor Newsoms and the Governor Pritzkers. And I wonder if maybe this effort now is to try to catch up with that. I also wonder if it will hurt him as he jumps into that 2028 fray. But all worth watching, all very interesting, and the type of stuff that you keep track of on nights like this.
And we chew over aggressively on nights like this. Terry Sullivan, I want to bring you in, CBS News political contributor, former campaign manager for Marco Rubio in 2016. So Pennsylvania, as we all know, Terry, crucial to any presidential aspirant. Bucks County, pretty important within Pennsylvania. Donald Trump won it in 2024, first Republican to do that since 1988. It's no accident that Governor Shapiro is in Bucks County, because if he does have national aspirations, winning in a county like that, and Pennsylvania writ large would have to be part of it. Did you hear in that set of remarks something that catches your ear as something that we might be hearing much more of in 2027, 2028?
Yeah, look, here's what I hear. Someone who'd have a tough time getting through a Democrat primary because he seems a little too reasonable. I'm not sure that, I mean, look, I think he'd be a formidable general election candidate for Democrats, but they're going to gravitate towards an AOC or someone who's more bombastic, who can throw more red meat. I think he gave a good speech there. I think he's got a very good record. He seems reasonable and responsible and downright a little bit boring, like the old days of what we expected out of our politicians. But that is not what's selling, and frankly, in either party right now. But in this case, specifically in the Democrat Party, that's not where the energy is. That's not where the fuel is. And this isn't going to give him. That's not a speech that is. He's getting hits on his campaign website tonight with donations from $10 donors. And so if you know, yes, it's a great speech and a great geographic location if he was auditioning for vice president. But to get through a primary, that's not what anybody. I don't know if the Democrats are going to have it in Iowa this year, if they've given up on that completely or what. But New Hampshire, South Carolina, wherever it is, those primary voters, Democrat primary voters, that's not what's appealing to them, and that's where his problems, I think, is going to be.
Joel, how much do you agree or disagree with what Terry just said? Because if I heard Terry correctly, he's like, the energy and the contours of the conversation among most likely primary and caucus voters within the Democratic Party is more to that fight, progressive, liberal wing. Agree or disagree?
Okay, two things, Major. Number one, he brought up Iowa, which made me think of my guy, Rob Sand, who I graduated with and who very likely is going to put the governorship of Iowa in play for Democrats because he's running against the brand of the Democratic Party.
You think he'll know how to run a caucus?
But secondarily, Terry's not going to get me off track here. The second point, Major, to your question, I don't think he's completely wrong in that someone like Shapiro, yes, presents a great resume, but it's that point about it. Does he offer the type of galvanizing force that brings together a different type of coalition? And that might seem silly to some, but when you have a Democratic Party that's depressed, that has lost trust for the leadership of the party, you need someone who can reunite the transformers, who can bring people back together with energy and excitement and with vision. I'm not saying Josh Shapiro can't. I'm saying I think he has more work to do to demonstrate that he can do that nationally. And when you think about some of the other folks that he likely would be vying for attention with nationally, that's going to be a challenge. An AOC, a Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, folks who have been out there on the front lines a bit more, whether or not you like their politics, they have figured out ways to titillate the Democratic base, the Ro Khannas, so on and so forth. Those folks have been out there in the fight. I think Governor Shapiro hasn't. That's a choice. And I think now is a moment where you have to see how does he show up in that fighty type of moment that Democrats are looking for.
And Terry, before we go to break, I want to give you the final word on this, because if I heard you correctly, there is this component on the left, there's this component on the right. Fight, fight, fight. Be super aggressive, very partisan in your loyalties and your inclinations and your reliable behavior. And from your vantage point, Shapiro just does not match that.
100%. And look, Joel used a lot of words to basically say I agree with Terry, but that's okay. But look, we actually are on the same page on this, which is, look, that's not the passion. Look, no one in the history of politics has ever been passionately moderate or passionately responsible. And so, but now it's just that to the nth degree where politics is at right now. And you've got to be able to bring out that passion in your party's base in order to win primaries. And that's, you know, on both sides. But in this case, specifically with Shapiro, he's a really responsible kind of guy. But that's being responsible. But we've seen that time and time again on both sides. Doesn't get it.
Major print the shirts, passionately moderate.
I'll call the printer during the break. I promise you both. Terry Sullivan, Joel Payne, thank you very much. You are watching CBS News America Decides Campaign 2026. And we'll be right back.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police!
You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
I'm Tony DeCopel from a region at war tonight.
To tell the story,
Hello up there.
you have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
I'm Tony. I work for CBS.
Can you clarify what this war is about? How do you avoid this becoming a death trap?
This war only seems to be accelerating.
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
Welcome back to CBS News America Decides Campaign 2026. We have a projection in Alabama. The projected winner, Tommy Tuberville, former member of the United States Senate, is going to be the Republican gubernatorial nominee. Next, Alabama governor, Democratic side. Kind of a theme here. Former U.S. senators running for governor. Doug Jones, big lead, not declared the winner. Only 16% of the vote in, but he's got a clear lead. Alabama Senate Republican primary. Barry Moore, endorsed by President Trump. A sizable lead. In a crowded field on the Republican side, no projection yet. only 6% of the vote in. I want to turn now to David Becker, CBS News election law expert and political contributor. David, always great to see you. Walk our audience through redistricting, and then I have some questions for you about data that's being sought by the Trump Justice Department, voting procedures. We'll get to that in a second, but give me your take on redistricting.
Yeah, we're seeing a wave of mid-decade redistrictings like we've never seen before in American history. In the previous 50 years, we have seen 3 states in 50 years voluntarily engage in a mid-decade redistricting. In this cycle, we're at 10 already, and that's not even counting Virginia, which was overturned by the Virginia Supreme Court. This is creating potential confusion for voters and real challenges for election officials who are trying to implement that. We're seeing those challenges play out in Missouri right now, where there's a dispute between the Secretary of State and the local election officials that's in the courts over which plan to code voters for when they receive their primary ballots. In Louisiana, they've got a whole new second primary, which didn't even exist a month ago. In Alabama, we've got primaries happening today for some congressional districts, but there's going to be a special election, as Jan mentioned, for 4 congressional districts in August. So this is all very confusing for voters. They've never had to navigate something like this before. And yet, despite all that, we're still seeing very high turnout in the primaries, probably even a little more so on the Democratic side than on the Republican side.
David, I know you spend a lot of time with election administrators. And just for a second, explain to the audience how these variations in the calendar complicate their work, which is already full of a lot of procedures to prepare for both a predictable primary calendar and a predictable general election calendar.
Yeah, they're already dealing with extensive disinformation and conspiracy theories. They've been abused, threatened, and harassed for the last 6+ years. They're under-resourced. They just don't have enough money and staff to do all of the work they're expected to do. And then the legislatures in their states are now requiring them to implement these new redistricting plans. And that requires them to code each voter in the database to make sure they get the right ballot. This is a lot of work. It is manageable if it happens once every 10 years. It's really hard if it happens once every 2 years. If it happens once every 2 years and 6 months before a major midterm election, it's almost impossible. And so it's really a testament to how well they're doing under these incredibly challenging circumstances, that the primaries are going so well. We're seeing a few places where there were minor problems here or there. Of course, we know the Fulton County situation. There was one polling place where there was a lockdown due to a potential security issue. Fortunately, that wasn't a big issue, but they're keeping that polling place open until 11, and we're going to see those Fulton County results after. But we are seeing consistently these elections being run smoothly all over the country.
One other thing I want to raise with you, David, is the Justice Department request for voter rolls. You talked about the data burdens of the new election calendars, the new coding. That has to be another complicating factor, and some states are straight up resisting that.
Yeah, there are 30 states plus D.C. that have been sued by the Department of Justice. These aren't just Democratic states. 5 of the last 6 states that were sued were led by Republican election officials. The DOJ is trying to seize not just the voter lists, which there are public versions of the voter list. They're trying to seize the sensitive data, the Social Security numbers, the driver's license numbers, the dates of birth, as I call it, the holy trinity of identity theft, that states are required by their state laws to protect for very good reason. If anyone gets that information, they could destroy any of us financially at the very least. And so the states are really mostly saying, no, we're not going to share that data. It's a bipartisan group of states. And we've already seen 6 states, 6 of those cases get decisions from the court, and the DOJ has lost all 6 of those states. Just today, there was an argument in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals over 2 of those cases, Oregon and California, which did not go the DOJ's way. We'll see how that appellate court rules. But as a former DOJ voting section lawyer myself, I think it's pretty clear that federal law does not entitle the DOJ to collect this very sensitive information on voters, and the courts are agreeing with that, including in those 6 cases, 2 judges appointed by President Trump.
How we vote and the administrators who help us vote, a crucial part of every election cycle. That's why we rely on David Becker. David Becker, great stuff. I am told I am freed from this position, and I can actually walk over to see CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. So I'm going to walk, Anthony.
Come on down.
I'm going to walk. It's so freeing. Balance of power. Let's get into it.
Let's talk about it. I've been saying, and I will continue to say, you see this narrow band in here, how many toss-ups, how many House seats we rate as toss-ups, and just a few more on either side that we even rate as leaning to the Dems and the Reps. Historically, this is really narrow. There are not many toss-ups in the House contest.
So do I hear you saying, Anthony, that this is a wave-free environment politically, that there cannot possibly be a wave of any kind?
I am not saying that.
Okay, good.
I am saying that entering into this, one thing you have to remember is that while people say they don't like redistricting, and they don't, right? I always put this number on the board, which is 96%. That's the percentage of partisans who vote for their party all the time. And what that means is you start gerrymandering districts, and all of these on the R side and all of these on the D side, they're probably not going to move because those voters will so reliably stick with their parties. That's how the sort of the ground up version of all of this. But at the same time, would a big wave start to push a little further out into the margins of this? Yes, that is still a possibility.
And Anthony, I always try to think about things that might be on the minds of our audience. Some of our viewers might be saying, wait a minute, I hear stuff all the time anecdotally about people opting out of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party and thinking of themselves and acting behaviorally as independents. Where do they factor, if at all, in any of this?
Well, they don't always vote for different parties. They think of themselves as independents, but more often than not, and they'll tell you this, they fall back to one party or the other.
And more importantly, the parties know that.
And the parties know that, and that's why you see a lot of the debate going on here, and the consultants were just talking about this, where it's about motivation more so than persuasion. It can be that the parties are trying to get people to come out and turn out, which we'll watch closely this year, but it's very expensive and very hard to get people to change their minds. And if I could move very quickly from the House and show you the Senate battlegrounds as well, this is also not a large list, but this is where the Senate control is going to fall in terms of the battlefield here. We talked about Georgia, few that are Democratic held they would have to hold, and then a few that the Republicans hold that they would have to hang on to as well.
And the one thing about North Carolina is we're currently thinking of that as potentially a Democratic pickup.
Yeah, it's a potential pickup. I've got it.
Tom Tillis not seeking re-election.
Exactly.
Michael Whatley, the former Republican National Party chairman, against Roy Cooper, Democratic governor, no longer governor, but run and
He's
ran
one statewide office,
twice.
right?
Yes.
He's one statewide
and
office.
as Attorney General.
It's very hard for the Democrats to flip North Carolina, but the thinking is, the polling suggests, frankly, that he would be the one who could do it. The harder stuff for them is Ohio and Iowa. The reason I say it's harder is these states have a lot of the kinds of voters who have moved toward the Republicans in recent years.
Yes.
Right? White, working class voters, all of
Iowa especially.
Iowa especially, right? It wasn't that long ago the Democrats had Iowa in play. You can remember back to Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
But nope, Iowa has moved. So the Democrats would like to think they can put that in play. And Alaska, this is kind of a fun one. This one, you know, you could see maybe they use a ranked choice voting system. It could be a little close. They've elected Democrats before. Okay, that's another one we'll keep an eye on.
Anthony Salvanto, great stuff as always. Caitlin, Huey Burns, and Nicole Killian are in Washington, D.C., side by side. And I'm just noticing this, very color coordinated. Well done. Nicole.
Election green.
Election green. Nicole, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was going to say green is the new purple on election night, but, you know, a couple of quick
Nicole
points.
Killian for the win. There we go.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points, though, with respect to the conversation that you're having around the balance of power and redistricting. You know, I think this really, even though that margin is very narrow in terms of potential toss-up seats, what we're seeing with redistricting is this could potentially expand the map, as you've alluded to earlier, with Republicans. We've already heard from Speaker Mike Johnson this week, according to some reports, telling donors he believes with these redistricting moves that the Republicans could potentially pick up anywhere from 7 to 8 seats. And then just today, you had Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries addressing a progressive conference here in D.C., where he's now looking to 2028 and potentially a number of blue states, upwards of 7 states that could potentially redraw their maps or be encouraged to redraw their maps, whether that's states like New York, perhaps Virginia again, among others. So I think that is really the dynamic to watch. Now, even still with the dynamics of redistricting, both sides, while Republicans may feel a bit more bullish. I also talked to then our CC chair, Rich Hudson, last week, who said in light of redistricting, yes, they feel a little bit more confident about the map, but keep in mind, folks like Jeffries, the DCCC, still feel that they have a really solid chance here, even if they end up losing seats, particularly because of some of these issues around affordability, the war in Iran, that they feel will pull more voters over to their side. I think the last thing that I would mention, too, just on this redistricting portion, is that you will also likely see a change in the makeup of Congress. So while we talk about the balance of power, there is a lot of discussion, particularly as we see these southern states redistrict, what that does to groups like the Congressional Black Caucus, which have warned they could lose upwards of more than a dozen members. So those are some dynamics to watch as we watch these midterm races continue to play out.
Caitlin, Huey Burns, what is the conversation on the Senate side of the Capitol, the corridor conversation about the larger national atmospherics and some of the things that Anthony was pointing to? It is a very steep climb. Democrats acknowledge that to attain a Senate Democratic majority after the midterms. But what's the overall atmosphere on both sides that you detect when you talk to senators about what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're experiencing?
Well, Major, today was such an interesting test case of this because, yes, it has almost been a foregone conclusion from Republicans and Democrats that the House is just, it's very hard for Republicans to keep, just given the headwinds. The Senate has long been kind of their bulwark then against that. But the dynamics are really important to watch because today, the president endorsed Ken Paxton in Texas. Now, do I think Democrats are going to win Texas? Likely not. It's a huge uphill climb. But now Republicans are going to have to spend a lot of money there to back Paxton. And what was so notable today was that usually you have Republicans on the Senate side, when we press them on these things, kind of toe the party line. Today they expressed their frustration, they seemed upset about this, some of them, and acknowledged, even people like Lindsey Graham, a close ally of the president, acknowledged that now this is going to cost them a lot of money that they could be spending in other races. So the Senate is still a big uphill climb for Democrats to take. They know that. But they're looking at something like today and the way in which the president makes kind of these unforced errors or makes life a little bit more difficult for Republicans in the Senate. That could be something that, at least in terms of the money involved here, could change the dynamic. We also, tonight in Georgia, we're likely going to see a prolonged primary fight on the Republican side. And Democrats I've been talked to feel like that benefits them, because if you look at Ossoff, he's sitting on a ton of money. And the more time that Republicans have to kind of duke it out through this primary, the less time they have to define Ossoff. And that's what they're going to have to do throughout the summer. Remember, this is a state that the president just won. And so that's kind of the battleground that they are facing. Still an uphill climb, but in terms of the money and resources and kind of infrastructure needed, they need a lot of things to go right.
Caitlin Huey Burns, thank you so very much. I'm back at the desk. There's only so much free-range Major they will tolerate here in New York, I promise you. You're watching CBS News America Decides Campaign 2026. I promise you, we'll be right back.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gayle King.
Hey!
CBS
Mornings. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7.
CBS.
CBS Mornings. CBS Mornings.
What she said.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
A woman is run off the road.
He just hit my car.
And calls 911.
He is there to kill her.
Surveillance camera images help identify her killer.
He appears in a hurry. He was hunting that night.
Absolutely.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
A man convicted in the arson death of a billionaire in Monaco reinvents himself and decades later orders a hit in New Mexico.
He kept asking me if I knew somebody that could kill his wife.
You think he targeted her?
Yeah.
This isn't the first time he's been in question of a heinous crime.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the Takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on the Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News America Decides Campaign 2026. We have a new projection. Kentucky Senate Democratic primary. Let's bring it up. Charles Booker, a former member of the Commonwealth State House of Representatives, the projected winner over Amy McGrath, who ran against Mitch McConnell in 2020, was well funded, but nevertheless lost that race. Amy McGrath loses again. In Kentucky, the Senate Republican primary. We've told you this, but just to redouble our efforts, Andy Barr, the clear victor over Daniel Cameron. Andy Barr will win the Republican nomination for the United States Senate. And in the very closely watched 4th Congressional District, Ed Gallrein defeats incumbent Thomas Massie in a race that attracted some $34 million, maybe $35 million, the most expensive House primary in American history. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe has been tracking that race for a considerable number of days and joins us from Massie's headquarters. Ed.
Major, a few things to observe here. First of all, it's been more than an hour since Massie wrapped his concession speech, and I can't help but notice he's still here taking pictures with his supporters. You don't often see the losers stick around quite like this, but when a room of hundreds of your closest friends and supporters start chanting 2028, 2028, maybe he starts taking names and numbers down just in case he thinks about running for something else in a few years. As he joked at the crowd, he said, well, 2028, there's a congressional seat up again, and they laughed, no. They want him to aim higher. Part of why he's thinking and why he's suggesting that tonight is because what they did do here is win the youth vote quite successfully. At least that's what the early returns would suggest, according to his campaign. That is an element of the Republican Party that is going to need to continue showing up, and he thinks they did a pretty innovative job of capturing that, despite the fact that they appear to be losing by double digits tonight, mostly because of the most rural parts of this pretty rural congressional district. They turned out in droves for the Trump-preferred candidate, Ed Gallrein. One other notable comment on tonight from Massie's Democratic ally, the Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who just a little while ago on X posted that he believes that Massie lost because he, in essence, stood up to the Epstein class, as Khanna says, and against the war. And he, in essence, said to the Massie coalition, hey, stick with guys like me, despite the fact that he's a Democrat, because they want to continue pushing for transparency on the Epstein matter, and as you see there, stand for the working class as well. That was a unique bipartisan relationship in the last year up on Capitol Hill, arguably the most productive and high-profile bipartisan relationship, because they pushed for the law that required the release of the Epstein documents and congressional access to them. They would argue that work is not yet done, but also, Major, as you know, in talking to regular everyday Americans, this is something that cut across party, geography, gender. It was a big topic. It remains a big topic of concern for voters because of what it reflects. And another Massie ally, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the former congresswoman from Georgia, making similar comments tonight, that if it weren't for the Epstein matter, perhaps Massie might have prevailed. Ed Gallrein, as we talked about earlier, is a fifth-generation cattle farmer and a one-time Navy SEAL who vows to be a reliable yes vote for the president once he gets to Congress, which, given the electoral history of this reliably Republican district, he probably will come January, and is reflective of the ongoing Trump remake of the Republican Party, which, this is just the latest chapter of a retribution tour that this spring at least has taken it from Indiana, where they knocked off a bunch of Republican state senators who didn't want to redistrict that state, despite the president's pleas. And then, of course, in Louisiana on Saturday, when Bill Cassidy placed third in a three-way primary there, and was rejected because of the fact that he'd voted to convict the president back in 2021 of impeachment.
And there might be another one next Tuesday in Texas with John Cornyn. Ed O'Keefe.
That's right.
Thank you very, very much. I want to go down to CBS News political director Fin Gomez. Fin, your thoughts on the evening?
Look, Major, just looking at the results from tonight, I think it's clear to me and clear to a lot of people in the political world that President Trump still holds an enormous amount of influence and sway in these Republican parties with this Republican base. We clearly saw that in Kentucky. We saw that in Georgia, too, with some of those key primary matchups. But we have been here before. In 2022, as you recall, in that midterm cycle, where the president was another run when he was out of power, he did something similar where he had a somewhat of a purity test for candidates in that respective midterm. In those respective midterm primaries, yes, they did well, sometimes defeating those who were more moderate or perhaps more traditionally conservative. Yet, when you got to the next stage, which was the general election, a lot of those candidates failed. Now, you might be seeing something a little bit similar here in this cycle. The climate, it's tougher for Republicans right now. We've seen that in our own polling this past week. The president's numbers are underwater. So the real test now is, as we move out of this primary, out of this primary and out of the primary stage of this midterm cycle, will be the general election test, and that's going to be the ultimate test here. Will these candidates do well in those respective tests, in those respective races?
Republicans in competitive primaries crave the Trump endorsement, but in a general election in a swing district or a swing state, maybe not so much in October and November. That is something we'll follow very closely. Fin Gomez, great stuff as always. CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. One more time with me, Anthony. What are we looking at? I see you have Georgia on the big screen.
I just want to button up Georgia with Collins going to a runoff. We'll see who his competition is in that. But this might make the Ossoff campaign happy, the incumbent Democrat, because the Republicans will be fighting this out in a runoff then for another few weeks while Ossoff goes around and campaigns. That could make a play there in the...
Not only fighting it out in the June 16th runoff, but will there be endorsements and will there be a coalescing of Republicans? Will there be hurt feelings after that process settles out? That's always a tough to answer question when there's been a contest with this many contestants. So hard fought.
Hurt feelings are always key. And then...
in politics and the rest of life.
Exactly. Cannot forget them. But here's something else I want to just do big picture, which is Let's bring this back to the economy for a moment, because voters keep telling us that is the most important thing. Yes, we can do the back and forth of who wins and who loses on
election after election after election.
But I just want to show you this one chart, right? Which party's policies do people think will help with your cost of living? Both parties are underwater on this. If you want to know how the midterms play out, watch this space. Who can make some gains on this? Who can convince voters that they might have a plan to help? That's really your determinative factor.
Anthony Salvanto, always with the most prescient watch this space analysis. Thank you very much. Our coverage will continue on your late local news and tomorrow on CBS Mornings. Thank you to all our correspondents, contributors, and guests. I'm Major Garrett in New York. It's been fun. Good night.
I want to know what's going on in the world. You can't do that if you're just sitting in a chair, reading about what other people have found. You have to get out there and listen. By telling people about each other, you actually bring this country together. There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. I'm Tony DeCopel. Join me on the CBS Evening News.
Who's our victim? 33 years old, naval intelligence officer.
Looks like there's a story there.
Oh, wow. That's really nice soap.
How about I just give you guys the highlights?
Federal agents! Everyone down!
The robbery and the murder are connected.
Genius, McGee. Elite. Very elite.
NCIS is all new CBS Tuesday, 8/7 Central, and streaming on Paramount+.
Go to the ends of the earth, half a world away, and reach for the stars.
It might take time to think. They might go get Brad.
Experience thought-provoking,
Something that speaks to people across time.
innovative,
It's this magical process.
and truly original reporting.
You've discovered you're more of a songwriter. Where does that leave you?
Great question. Because there's always something new under the sun. There's a lot more on the menu on CBS Sunday morning.
We're U.S. Marshals. We do this job because others can't.
Saddle up, cowboy.
Over 25 million viewers
Try to keep up.
have made CBS's Marshals TV's #1 news show.
Not turning you into a cowboy yet.
Back on the crazy train.
Let's go. Our Marshals came up big today.
Marshals, a new era of Yellowstone. New episodes CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount+.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Inside Abbey Road Studios.
This almost makes us Beatles.
The Police's Stuart Copeland
Love the drums. What is it about the orchestra?
creates Wild Concerto
Look at that.
I'm Tony. I work for CBS.
to tell the story.
I'm Tony DeCopel, live from one of the many cities in this region under fire.
You have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
We have a team of correspondents across the Middle East and at the White House.
I called President Trump to talk about his latest thinking.
Missiles coming in, and there's another one.
You can see how empty the streets are.
You heard the explosion?
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel. Weeknights.
Good to be with you. I'm Tony DeCopel. The breaking news right now. Wildfire emergency. More than 30,000 people under evacuation orders tonight in Southern California as wind-whipped flames threaten homes and property.
My community will come back stronger.